Hello, our topic is the zodiac sign Cancer. Cancer is known to be very sentimental. What do we mean by sentimental? Here's an example. Birthdays. It's your birthday. Cancer, by Cancer I mean somebody who has a lot of planets in Cancer. Maybe the Sun and Moon are in Cancer. Or Cancer is rising and there are a few personal planets in Cancer like Mercury and Venus. So there's a lot of Cancer in the person's chart. They're sentimental. It's your birthday. Your birthday's a big deal. They want to bring you a cake, a little present. The present doesn't need to be expensive, but hopefully has a lot of feeling, a memory, something that is important to you, that is symbolic of something that you love or plays an important part in your life. So this is the idea of Cancer, and it's nostalgic, remembering things. They like to look at old photographs. What happened in your childhood, the good old days, even when those good old days were not fun. When you look back at them, it seems fun to think back to those times. All of this emphasis on personal feeling, nostalgia, the atmosphere, the personal feelings, this is what is associated with the zodiac sign Cancer. And Cancer is also considered to be protective because they want to protect these near and dear things, and it's very family oriented. So I say here, Cancer, sentimental and nostalgic, clings to its family and home, right? That makes sense. Given what I just described, the person with many planets in Cancer loves his mother, of course, and very attached to the family heritage. Things like the food, the customs that you experienced during childhood, they have a very, very deep impression on the person, are very important. Cancer's feelings are easily hurt. Right? I mean, that makes sense. If you have all this personal feeling and attachment, your feelings can get easily hurt. They also have difficulty admitting that there are weaknesses and faults in family members. They become attached to their personal history, their family, their heritage, and they love it. And so sometimes they don't look at things very objectively to see what problems there may be. So that's the idea of the zodiac sign Cancer. Is it true? Okay, the image is clear. Is it true? How do we know if it's true? Usually what we do in astrology is we look at our charts, we look at friends and family, and we decide whether it's true or not. Well, there's an alternative to that. In addition, I think it's good to think of your own chart, friends and family, see if it makes sense. But there's something else you can do. In addition to that, it's very important, extreme case sampling. Extreme case sampling is just incredible way to figure out if things in astrology work or not. And I have two little tongue twister there, 2 tutorial videos on extreme case sampling. These go into considerable technical detail, but if you are curious about why extreme case sampling is so important, I have 2 videos on it. They're about a half hour each, so it's over an hour of information on this research method and why it's important and when in what conditions it's especially useful. And for zodiac signs is one of those cases. Okay. Now, what I did is I made an astro signature where I give certain number of points to Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, and ruler of the Ascendant. I give them more points, 5, and fewer to Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and then very few points to the outer planets. But really, the details of the formula don't matter that very much, because if you have a lot of planets in a zodiac sign, if you adjust your weighting system, it's not going to matter very much. You have all these planets in that sign, you're going to come out very strong in the score. Now, the idea of extreme case sampling is whoever comes out strongest has to exhibit the qualities of Cancer. If they don't exhibit the qualities of Cancer, we have a problem. Our theory probably is not correct, almost definitely is not correct. And I have just 3 people here. They came out the strongest number of points. One is a guy, Pierre Fournier. He's a cellist, plays the cello. He's a musician. Extreme Cancer. Another is Keith Whitley. He's a singer. American country singer. He also wrote songs. And another is a fellow Gaston Maspero. He's a historian and an Egyptologist. And by the way, Gaston Maspero's time, it is from a birth certificate, but it's on the hour. It's a round number time, like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever time it was, which was common in those back when he was born in France. But if he was born 7 minutes earlier, instead of Cancer rising, we'd have Gemini rising. So we need to be, aware of these things. He probably does have Cancer rising because you have to go back 7 minutes. But what if he was born actually 7 minutes earlier and they rounded it off? Maybe he really has Gemini rising. So just to be aware of that possibility with him. And he still has tons of Cancer and still must have strong Cancer qualities, even if he doesn't have Cancer rising because of all the other planets in Cancer. So do these 3 people have these traits of Cancer? If they don't, we pretty much have to reject our idea of what Cancer is. And if they do, then it's our theory that the zodiac sign works is viable. So this is really, really exciting stuff to me because we get to see if this stuff really works or not. We don't have to collect thousands of charts. We don't have to do statistical analysis. These 3 people must have Cancer. Now, before I go into the 3 people, let me tell you about my view of Cancer. I think that the interpretation of Cancer that I just gave is pretty good. I think that's very, very close. But I think that each zodiac sign is more of a process. And whether a person is nostalgic or not can vary. It's usually true, but not always. And it's a little abstract, but astrology is what it is. We don't get to decide what it is. And I think the zodiac signs have to do with an attitude, an approach. Well, it's not that abstract. But maybe a little bit less concrete because it's an attitude and an approach and a way of doing things. So I don't think Cancerians consistently have the traits described earlier. They usually do, but not always. And here's what I have come up with from earlier research, and it gets confirmed, I think, with these 3 people, that Cancer seeks an environment where it is safe and secure, and where it can express itself without being self-conscious or without having to play a role. Cancer wants a place where one's clothes are not uncomfortable uniforms. In other words, they don't want to put on a uniform. They don't want to dress up and be formal and go out in the world. They may want to do that as well. Something else in their chart may want to do that. But if you have a lot of Cancer in your chart, you want to feel comfortable. You want to feel natural. You want to feel safe and secure. And that's what happens when we're at home, right? When you're at home, you can just be yourself. Well, hopefully, you don't have to act a certain way to please other people in your family. You can just be natural. You can just not be self-conscious. You can just, if you want to lay down and read a book, you can lay down and read a book, and you don't have to worry about whether somebody thinks, you should sit up straight or something, or, you can just be natural, not self-conscious, and you're safe and you're protected. So Cancer seeks a family, a clan, or a neighborhood where it is at home. So my interpretation is not that different from the usual interpretation. The usual interpretation agrees with this. Cancer seeks a family, clan, or neighborhood where it is at home. But whether Cancer is nostalgic and sentimental, well, those traits tend to develop when you are seeking this comfort zone. I call it the cosmic egg. What Cancer is doing is building a cosmic egg. You can look at it as a stage in life. If you think of like a little chicken hatching out, and it's got this cosmic egg around it. The egg is permeable. It lets things in, but only a little bit. So you're protected through this permeable shell where things can flow in and out little by little and get absorbed into your protected shell. That's what Cancer wants. It wants to build an egg. It wants to build a safe, protected area in which it can be comfortable, at ease, and just breathe and not be disturbed. Now, Cancer is not always meek. There's this idea that Cancer is their feelings are easily hurt. They're not aggressive. They can be very aggressive because they want to protect this cosmic egg. So the zodiac signs, I don't think, are about a list of traits. It's about a process that you want to build this egg, and there's certain consequences that are typical from wanting to do that. Cancer can be very protective, can be very aggressive in protecting, and it does tend to be sentimental and nostalgic as a result of building this protected area. An interesting thing about Cancer, it may support unethical or hostile activities if it brings a feeling of being close to neighbors and if it repels cultures that are uncomfortable. Oops, got a missing T there, uncomfortable. Anyway, so it's all about building this protective egg. The egg what's inside this egg needs to be homogeneous. You can't have a bunch of confused things that are conflicting with each other. So that's what it wants to do. And Cancer will tend to sometimes be unethical or hostile if it serves their goal of creating this protected environment. Okay, so my interpretation is not that different from the usual interpretation, but the emphasis, what I think Cancer actually does, is a process, and the traits are only symptoms of the process. And that seems like a subtle point, but it's really, really important, because Cancer is not always, the most obvious thing about Cancer is not always that it's nostalgic, not always that it's sentimental, but they are protecting that egg, and a lot of behaviors that otherwise don't seem clear, like how is that related to Cancer, become clear when you realize what Cancer is trying to do. So that's the theory that I've come up with, and I think that this research supports it. So what are some typical behaviors for a person that needs to create this cosmic egg? They often join clubs, gangs, or teams. This is something that's sometimes overlooked. Gangs are very Cancerian. Clubs. People join the Army or the Navy or a sports team because they can create this unified, something that's something like a family unit, a unified, integrated world around them, a neighborhood. They're often very patriotic and protective. They're sometimes suspicious of, quote, foreigners. Not necessarily, but if those foreigners seem to disturb their cosmic egg, then they get very nervous about it. Here's another thing about Cancer. Money. Sometimes you'll see Cancerians are very, very money-oriented. People say Taurus is the money sign. Well, Cancer more often inclines to that. Why? Because money is a form of protection, of safety. And sometimes they want to have a lot of money to feel really safe. Not always. It's just one thing that a person will do. It's an expression of this need to create this safe, protective, cosmic egg in which they live. Things like food, long-term sustainability, these are symptoms of that process and that attitude towards the world, that I'm in this world, I need to make a protective egg in which to live. It'll be a beautiful world if I can do that. That's the, you might say, subconscious. It's not usually verbalized consciously for the person. It's an ingrained attitude that Cancer gives in the way the person relates to the world. They like to often play games or music or engage in other activities that create a mood and emotional connection and a feeling of being in one's comfort zone. So they often like little games, music. They like to live. They like to be alive in the little world, within this little shell, and have this beautiful, protected, safe, and emotionally deep, protected world that they can live in. And so playing games does that. It creates an aura around you where you're all together in your little world, and music can do the same thing. So these are some of the things that Cancer is inclined to. Now, do our three big people conform to this interpretation? If they do not, we have trouble with our theory. Let's see if it's true or not. Number 1, Pierre Fournier, cellist. Let me read from this website cello.org. This is a specific website address. What they say about Pierre Fournier. They say, known in his lifetime as the aristocrat of cellists because of his lyrical playing and for his impeccable artistic sensitivity. Even at such a young age, Fournier had tremendous virtuosity and was famous for his bowing facility. Now, technical competency is not part of Cancer. That comes from something else. But the artistic sensitivity, the deep feeling, this is what we expect from Cancer. Personal attachment, building this emotional world around him, becoming very emotionally immersed in his activity. So very deep personal feeling is one of the things that made Fournier outstanding. It's what people who love this kind of music think of when they think of Fournier. Here's a little story that expresses Fournier's unique quality as a cellist. Fournier was a friend of another great French cellist, Tortelier. I hope I'm saying these names correctly. I have no idea. So once they were meeting backstage after a recital by Tortelier, and Pierre said to him, Paul, so his name is Paul Tortelier, Paul, I wish I had your left hand. Okay, so the left hand, if you're right-handed, and both of them are, is the hand that holds down the strings. So Tortelier replies, very cleverly, Pierre, I wish I had your right arm. So the right arm is the one that bows and that gives the feeling and the expression. So these two friends are having a very clever respect for each other, where Tortelier has this extraordinary technical capability, and Fournier has this extraordinary depth of feeling, his bowing capability. Of course, both of them are great in both respects, both technically and in the expressive motion of their right arm and getting the feeling out, but one has a little more emphasis than the other. And of course, the one with all the Cancer has the great right arm, so to speak. So Fournier also enjoyed modern music as well as classical. In 1956, he made his home in Switzerland, but retained his French citizenship. Okay. So he played with extraordinary deep feeling and lyricism. And I think that's what we expect from Cancer. So Cancer, zodiac signs, Cancer or any zodiac sign, does not tell us what a person does. The idea that Cancer is going to be in the kitchen or whatever ends up not being true. Research has been done, and the zodiac signs do not tell us what a person does, but they tell us how they do it. So he goes into music, he's going to do it with personal feeling and depth of emotion. Here's another story about Fournier. Excuse me. So he lived through World War II, and Fournier had collaborated with the Nazis during the occupation of France. He was found to have performed 82 times on Radio Paris, a German station. Okay, so the Nazis are taking over. As you know, they have very strong cultural standards. They only endorse certain music and art, and they throw the rest out. And they supported Fournier. His music was considered to be okay. And he got to play 82 times on this radio station. The National Purging Committee's professional branch for dramatic and lyrical artists and performing musicians had found him guilty of collaboration and had banned him from performing for a period of 6 months. So this is very common for Cancer. They want to build this cosmic egg. If somebody supports and appreciates the world that you live in, they're happy, they feel good about it. You might say, well, gee, isn't his cosmic egg threatened by these Nazis? Well, it is threatened, of course. The traditions are threatened. But they are embracing and supporting what he's doing, and very often that's good enough for Cancer. It's more threatening if his life is completely torn apart and all traditions are lost. So Cancer often makes the decision based on what feels good, not on an ethical set of rules. If it protects the family, I mean, parents know this. If it's going to make your child safe, then you're going to do it 9 times out of 10 or more. So he gets to play his music. They appreciate his music. They support him. He gets to play 82 times on this radio station. He can create. He can make his music. As long as he can make his music, he's happy, because his music is his little world of feeling that he can create around him and sustain the traditions and feelings that he developed throughout his lifetime. So that's very common with Cancer, to be able to do that. So I think that the lifestyle and the approach of Fournier is consistent with Cancer. If we read about him and it said he had great technical virtuosity, but was criticized for lack of feeling, where he didn't continue the deep emotional traditions of his culture, then we would say, well, gee, something's wrong here. He must have something must have been dysfunctional to disrupt the natural flow. But people that are highly productive, highly expressive, are generally, they're channeling that energy very well, and we see it all makes sense. He's doing what Cancer likes to do. He's very successful at it, and he expresses the qualities that we expect him to have. Now here's Keith Whitley. He's an American country music singer, and he has a lot of problems. He has problems with being an alcoholic, drug use. He dies at 33 years of age. The cause of death is given as alcohol poisoning, and he, as a young person, he's wild. He's wild. He's out of control, you might say, drinking and driving fast and all this stuff. Dies young, but he has this gift for music, and he immerses himself in it. And even though he dies at age 33, he has a lasting legacy. People love his music, and he's influenced a lot of people. So let's read a little bit. Oh, I don't have the source. I'm pretty sure that this is from Wikipedia, this quote. As a teenager, Whitley and his friends would pass the time drinking bootleg bourbon and racing their cars down mountain roads at dangerous speeds. Whitley was once in a car whose driver attempted to round a curve at 120 miles per hour. The car wrecked, killing his friend and almost breaking Whitley's neck. In another incident, he drove his car off a 120-foot cliff into a frozen river, escaping with only a broken collarbone. This is unbelievable. This is like stuff you usually only see in a movie, but he really was this crazy. Now, during the new recording sessions in 1987, Whitley started feeling that the songs he was doing were not up to his standards, so he approached RCA and asked if the project of 15 songs could be shelved. Okay, so he has high standards for his music. Do we think of Cancer as having high standards? No. But when it comes to your emotional expression, your music, your food, your family, this cosmic egg that you're creating, you can be very aggressive, very particular, have very high standards. So sometimes in astrology you say, oh, Virgo is the one with high standards and is picky. Well, it depends on what you're talking about. With Cancer, when it comes to family, when it comes to their emotional expression, the thing, whatever it is that they feel creates this emotional experience, this bond with their environment, with the world they live in, very high standards. So Whitley was a long-time alcoholic who began drinking early in his career at bluegrass gigs, long before he was legally allowed to drink alcohol. Many times he had attempted to overcome his alcoholism, but he failed, and his pre-existing depression made it more challenging for him to quit. So he's suffering from depression, alcoholism, drug use. So he lived dangerously when he was young, and that's not a usual association. We don't think of Cancer as living dangerously. Maybe it's something else in his birth chart, but actually it's not unusual. When Cancer's feelings are hurt, something, I'm going to assume something disturbed his sense of being protected, of being safe at some early age, of his cosmic egg being threatened. And when the cosmic egg is threatened, Cancer does crazy things. It'll rebel. Usually they will seek some other bond. They'll join gangs. This is a big driving force for gangs in inner cities. People want that bond, that family, that protection. And they often incline towards alcoholism and depression. Now, we don't have research yet to support that Cancer might be more inclined to these things. So that's a little bit speculative. But it makes sense. You'll often get these strong emotional reactions, not just based on the person being inherently wild and out of control, but as a reaction to not finding and not being able to manifest, to create in the world the protection, the family feeling that they're seeking. So some speculation there to make sense out of his chart. And make sense out of his life. That's the only way that we can make sense, and we are in fact guessing here. We're guessing that all of this behavior is coming out of, not only from, but one major contributor to his behavior is some kind of sense of loss of that protection and that happiness early in his life. That's what we have to guess. So, whether the astrology is working or not, we have a way to understand it. That would be the way that we would understand it. If you're a cynic of astrology, then you might say, well, I'm fishing for ways to make sense of it. But the nice thing is, if he was still alive, or if we can research this somehow through his family, we can find out if this is true. Was there some threat, maybe a slightly traumatic experience or a series of experiences early in his life that made him feel threatened, and for him to act out like this, and to go into depression? Because Cancer will go into depression when it feels that its life is not protected and that they're not cared for. They will become depressed and do these things. That's our theory, and that's how we make sense of it. The point is this: we have to find a way of seeing if astrology works, and that's the theory that we're coming up with. And it will be interesting if we can find out more about his early life and see if we can confirm that. Okay, our last person, Gaston Maspero, an Egyptologist. And I think Maspero confirms our sense that zodiac signs do not tell us what a person does, but how they do it. He masters the ancient Egyptian language. He translates hieroglyphics. He's an academic. He's an intellectual. We don't think of Cancer as being academic or intellectual. And that's one of our problems with interpreting zodiac signs, is that whether a person's academic or intellectual is going to be more in the aspects. The zodiac signs do not really give talent. They don't give talent. I shouldn't say not really. They don't give talent. They just give the way, the style that you do things. The aspects will tell you what the person does. So something in the aspects in his chart indicate that he must have this love of languages and so on, and then he does it in a Cancerian way. So he loves Egyptian history. He preserves the soul of Egypt. He protects and cares for that culture. And Cancer can adopt new cultures and lifestyles. They will gravitate to some world, to some culture that interests them and that they feel comfortable in. And here's a quote from Wikipedia that expresses his Cancerian approach to history. Gaston Maspero was born in Paris to Jewish parents of Italian origin. Now listen to this. He arrests these brothers, the Abd al-Rusul brothers, from the notorious treasure hunting village of Gorna. So these guys are trying to steal the treasures, the Egyptian treasures. This is a big problem. A lot of the ancient treasures have been stolen. And they confess to stealing these treasures under torture. Maspero tortures them to get out of them the confession that they were stealing these very important historical treasures. And here's some details about the place and the time. Now, do we think of cancer as torturing people? As I said before, we don't think of cancer that way, but when it comes to this cosmic egg, to this precious tradition, and here we notice the tradition doesn't necessarily have to be the one you were born into. So notice that he himself has a mixture of traditions. He's born in Paris to Jewish parents, so he's born in France, Jewish parents, which is not the majority religion, and they're of Italian origin. So he already is born with this appreciation that you can mix together different things and appreciate different cultures. He develops this attachment to the Egyptian history and way of life, and he protects it. And he will torture people to find out if they're stealing. It's like stealing from your house. This is what cancer does. So rather than think of cancer as a set of personality characteristics, think of it as a process. They're trying to protect this cosmic egg. And this is an egg that he found, the Egyptian history and culture that he's interested in. The fact that ancient Egyptian culture is not very much alive today doesn't matter. Cancer doesn't care about time. It just wants to immerse itself in a world, it doesn't matter whether it's a popular world or what world it is, where it feels something whole, something protected, a little world in which people lived. He also introduced admission charges for Egyptian sites to increase the number of tourists, to pay for the upkeep and maintenance, whatever is needed to make this happen. So, here are their charts, by the way. Here's Fournier. You see the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant all in Cancer. Also Mercury and Mars in Cancer. And Neptune happens to be in Cancer. So that huge amount of Cancer. This is the cellist. The Moon rising in Cancer. Here's Whitley, the country singer, who is wild, driving crazy and all this stuff. He also has Cancer rising and Sun and Moon, also triple Cancer. He also has Jupiter, Mercury, and Uranus in Cancer. I mean, this is just unbelievable amounts of the zodiac sign. Triple sign alone is less than 1 out of 1,000 people is going to have that. And the last one, Gaston Maspero, our Egyptologist, Sun rising in Cancer. This is what I mentioned. If he was born 7 minutes earlier, he'd have Gemini rising. So, but he probably does have Cancer rising. This is from birth certificate, 4 a.m. Sun rising in Cancer, Moon in Cancer as well, and Mercury and Mars in Cancer. So all of these people have huge amounts of Cancer. They must exhibit these Cancerian qualities in very conspicuous ways. And I think it shows up in the style, the attitude and approach that they take towards doing what they do. So these are the conclusions. I think I've already said all this. I don't think I need to repeat this. Let me just read the second paragraph. Cancer gives the desire to have a safe environment. Okay, here's our conclusion. Cancer gives a desire to have a safe environment where one can feel comfortable in the culture, in the lifestyle, and the neighborhood in which one lives. Cancer often fights to protect the culture, lifestyle, and way of life of a people. Cancer is capable of adopting a new culture when the culture accepts the person into it, or the culture is impressive or deserving of respect and appreciation. Cancer develops a strong personal attachment and emotional connection to what it does. It has, you could call it soul. That depth of feeling preserves and protects the memories and feelings associated with a place or time period. Okay, so what we're coming up with Cancer is a pretty strong support that the idea of Cancer that astrologers use is good. We've put a particular emphasis on it as a process to create a protective world, and that some of the symptoms of this process are not the ones that we often talk about. Cancer can be aggressive. It can adopt a new culture. It's not necessarily obviously nostalgic, etc. It finds ways to create this protected world. So that is Cancer. It does not tell us what the person does. We have a theory that matches the data. Now, does this prove anything? Have we clearly and absolutely and definitively and unambiguously shown that astrology works? No, but we're just building a theory that's consistent with the evidence. And we're going beyond anecdotal evidence, using extreme case sampling to see that the theory is viable. It's viable. Appears to be, okay, that's my last slide, just making sure. It appears that this actually makes sense, and it adds some clarity to our understanding of the zodiac sign Cancer. Okay, my friends, thank you very much for listening. God bless. Namaste.